So welcome to our Rational Labs super cool showcase event where our behavioral scientist, Erin Mahoney, is going to melt your brains with what behavioral science tells us about traveling and how all of you can do it better. By way of a reminder, the sequence of our member events is usually, there's an asterisk here, it's usually the second week of the month is Ask Kristen Anything. Third week of the month is some genius from one of our behavioral scientists here at Rational Labs. And the fourth week of the month is generally an open event. This week we clustered two events together. So yesterday was, just because of scheduling conflicts, yesterday was Ask Kristen Everything. Today is Erin Mahoney. So we generally send these invites out at the first of the month. That said, if you didn't get the invites or you joined mid-month in the bootcamp or the membership, you can go to the Luma link that I just shared in the chat. You can get your fresh calendar invites pumped to your GCal, Outlook Cal, or Power Super Awesome Cal, whatever you use. But this is exciting stuff. So this is today's internal closed super secret exclusive event. Next week, we have a speaker from Common Sense Lab at Duke University, Muriel Beasley, who's going to talk about deep dive into research methods and behavioral design. Then we reboot the sequence in May with another Ask Kristen Anything. And we have exciting events coming up for next month. We just don't have those posted yet here at Luma, but we will after the first of the month, because that's when all the action happens. So some of you are with us because you're an Irrational Labs member. Some of you are officially super fans because I see you every time we do an event and I love it. But again, you are welcome to join the membership if you have not. It is $99 for a year and allows you to be part of our dynamic Slack community, all the resources, feedback, and expertise contained therein. And if you've just signed up for one of our boot camps, you may be in the behavioral design course, which is the 101 behavioral design engagement. And then we have the financial specialization and health specialization. The big difference is the finance and the health courses have very, very specialized case studies for those particular verticals. And they're our most popular offerings. And as such, they're priced a little bit higher. But not a lot. You'll have to click on it. Oh, wait, did you want to click on it? Cool. That's in the chat as well. So if you don't know about the boot camps, read on there. Remember, Rational Labs is a consultancy. We are excited to collaborate with you in any way, shape, or form. We do all kinds of neato stuff for the top companies in the world. So if you need help with some product design, if you need some prototyping, if you need some marketing and growth support, employee engagement, wellness, if you want us to come do some team training or even help with a startup, we are here. Reach out to us through the website or ping any of us over at Slack. Now, woo, all the commercials are done and we get to the main event, ladies and gentlemen. You are in for a treat, as is always the case at Irrational Labs events. Erin Mahoney is a behavioral scientist with us here at Irrational Labs, in case you didn't figure that out from context clues. But I like to make sure everybody knows these things. She specializes in the intersection of behavioral economics and product design research, putting human behavior at the center of product strategy and design decisions. So watch your behavior today, ladies and gentlemen. She will be watching you. Erin has worked with organizations in the education, health, life sciences, consumer, and government sectors to design products and services based on a deeper understanding of users. She's built custom frameworks to embed BSI in client teams, developed interventions to drive changes in customer perception and behavior, and led research programs to understand ecosystems of user mental models. Prior to joining Irrational Labs, Erin worked in higher education consulting and design research. Throughout her career, she's developed particular interests in workplace engagement and the visualization and communication of data. So I haven't previewed her deck, but it better look awesome, Erin. No pressure. Now that I realize that's in your bio. But where did she learn things besides the field and a great family? I'm sure of it. Well, she has a BA in cognitive science from Yale University, which is not New York City. It's in that little state above it called Connecticut. And she focused on psycholinguistics, which is all the rage in New Haven, and language acquisition. She received her MED in mind, brain, and education at Harvard University, where she studied data analysis, neurodevelopment, and learning analytics. But before we give her a round of applause and a welcome and a virtual and a real one, Erin, what languages do you speak?
It's funny, I actually only speak English and French. I spent my undergrad thesis studying people who speak lots of languages and also don't speak lots of languages myself.
That's okay. Two is still very cool.
Yeah.
Très, what's cool in French? I forget.
Honestly, typically it's cool.
Oh, très cool then. Easy enough. I could do
Yeah.
this. Nice. So without any more of my babbling, let's get to the main show. Erin, welcome. Give her a round of virtual and real applause. You can even unmute to do this if it makes you feel good. If it makes her feel good. Um, let's get the party started and go on an adventure. Thanks for coming today, Erin.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Are we all good? Yep. Okay. Great. Well, hi, happy Friday. Thank you all for coming. It's great to meet you. Today, we're going to talk about what behavioral science can tell us about traveling. So maybe that should have been in my bio too, that this is a random interest area of mine, but we'll get to that in just a second. We'll talk about some sort of travel hacks, so to speak, that you can apply to your next trip and the ways that products around us are and are also not helping. One thing I will note is that I don't have a behavioral hack for traveling and dealing with crews working on your roof. So apologies in advance if that presents any loud noises in my background today. No behavioral hack for that one. Okay.
Yeah, but that adds color and flavor to your presentation, just so
It
you know.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if there are any big bangs, we'll be like, ooh, that was a dynamic slide.
That's right. Yeah, I did that on purpose. Okay, so I want to start by polling the room. You can come off mute, you can use the chat. I want to know what the best trip is that you've ever taken. And I don't necessarily want to know, they might be the same thing, but maybe not. Your favorite place you've ever been, but think about the best trip you've ever taken. So maybe that's, oh, I went to, this place with my family a few years ago. Hey, my friends and I went and did this beach weekend, whatever it was. Yellowstone family reunion, wine country. Yep, that sounds nice. Touring the US with a hardcore punk band. Brad, I want to hear so much more about that. Indonesia forest village in Borneo. Wow. Okay, these sound awesome. I'm adding everything on this list in this chat to my list. Looks like we have multiple scuba divers in the room too. Okay, so my follow-up question to this is what made it great? Was it really great because of where you went or the place you stayed in or what you did, who you traveled with, something else? Maybe it was great because of the punk band that was awesome. That seems probably true to me. What are the things that make these things great? The people I met and the experiences, totally. Experiencing how people live completely differently. Yep, that sounds great. Give first and collective community culture. Awesome. Fact that I wasn't in class. Yep, relate to that. That seems right. Spontaneity of the things, off the beat hiking, family and adventure, copious wine, always good. Living in a different way, local friends and challenges. Awesome. These sound great. Okay, so I want you to keep in mind as we go through this this talk today, the awesome places you've been, the trips you've taken, and maybe the next one you've got on your bucket list, the thing that you're planning next, and maybe we'll see if we can figure out some ways to make that even better. Okay, so I'm going to add all those to my list, but in the meantime, I should probably introduce myself first. So Ryan took you through all of my lovely bio. Also want to note that, sorry if anyone's in New York, please go to New Haven for pizza. I realize this is a thing we will fight about. It's fine. So like Ryan said, during the day, I'm a behavioral scientist at Irrational Labs. But outside of work, at the moment, I'm sort of what some people would call a digital nomad. And What do I mean by that? So I am spending about a year-ish of my life traveling around the US, living in different places for about 5 or 6 weeks at a time, checking them out, moving on, sort of experiencing what life is like in all of these places. So I go a new place every few weeks, and I can't really separate those worlds of what I do during the day and what I'm doing nights and weekends. So I spend a lot of my free time thinking about the behavioral science of traveling. I feel like that's one of the things our behavioral scientists will tell you. It's a blessing and a curse. We walk through the world, we see these examples in real life, and we just can't ignore them. So that's what I'm doing now. So I've decided that from this year-ish of doing this, I'm going to decide to qualify myself as a travel expert for the moment. So where some people might plan a trip a couple of times a year, right now I'm planning trips constantly, right? I am currently traveling, but also I'm planning for traveling to 8 more places this year, each for another 5 or 6 weeks at a time. And so I've learned a lot about the ways to optimize my travel and how not to optimize my travel, right? It's got to be efficient. It's got to work well for me. I have to do this while holding my full-time job and living my life. And it's really helpful, I think, to think about these things for people like me who are sort of digital nomading for a while. But I also think the same lessons apply for everyone, no matter what the trip is that you're taking. And I think that's a lot of people. So I've decided this is the most fun and most interesting thing about my life to talk about, and the most cool new way I think about behavioral science. Okay, I'm going to keep checking on the chat. Oh, in New Haven, had Pepe's once. Love that. Okay, great. So at Irrational Labs, we often start by breaking down our journey into all of its component parts, and we think about every action and behavior that has to be taken across a flow. We think about decisions, we think about comprehension points. We try to not forget those pieces because they take work too, just as much as it takes work to walk somewhere, to drive somewhere, to click a button. And so I'm calling this very high level, the anatomy of a vacation, right? Starts with initiation. You make some decisions, you plan and book things, you've got time that you're actually going to and from, you've got the vacation itself, and then the afterwards. And this looks, I think, relatively true, but also relatively simple, and it takes a lot more work than that. So here's what I think it really looks like. First, we have this lovely eureka, I'm going on a trip moment. Who knows what that looks like? Maybe you've decided, hey, my family reunion is in upstate New York this summer and I'm going to go there. Or maybe you've decided my spouse and my kids and I are going to go to Italy for a week, or whatever that is. Maybe you even decided, I really need a vacation. I don't really know where I should go. Then we go to all of the decisions. Where do I go? What should I do? Where should I stay? Who should I go with? All kinds of questions to answer. Then we got to book it all. You actually get on your way, you go take your vacation, and phew, I'm home, I can unpack. Or maybe like me, you actually don't unpack for kind of a few days and then it sits there for a while and nobody else. Okay. So there are 3 places in this flow that I think behavioral science is particularly telling and informative, and there are moments of behavioral pain and barriers, and they're places that we can redesign the way that we do things. So I want to talk about all of those. I'm going to put those all up in this nice list. So the first one is making choices. That's the where should I go? What should I do? Where should I stay? There's the payments. I got to book all the things that I picked. I got all excited about them, but they're not free. And then there's the satisfaction piece. So that's all the way at the end. I've gotten home. Maybe I've unpacked, maybe not. And I want to look back on my trip. Okay, so let's dig into this first one first. Like I said, there's a lot of decisions that you could be making when you're travel planning. Again, where do you go? Maybe you started with just a dream to go to Italy, or maybe you decided, I just want something tropical and sunny and warm. It's February in New England and I'm freezing. Then you have to pick, when do you go, right? Is it nice at all different times of year where you're going? I particularly remember planning a honeymoon a few years ago and thinking, oh, okay, maybe the Caribbean is nice. And then I thought, oh, shoot, it's hurricane season. Never mind, scratch that. Are there certain events you want to go for, times that work for you and the people you're traveling with? Then you think about, where do you stay? A hotel, an Airbnb, with a friend? Maybe it's a combination of those or a whole bunch of them. Then there's the how do you get there? And then there's the what do you do? And that feels like the options are endless. So on the left, this, I think, is sort of the problem we all face, right? You see, oh, well, I don't know if you do. I see these articles all the time. Maybe I just get targeted with all these things, but I see things all the time. 50 best places to travel in 2023. Well, that's great, but that's 50 options. Okay, well, I'm going to go to LA. I'm going to look up things to do. 2,000 places I could go. Okay, I'm going to look up hotels. I want to go to New York for this night. 787 possibilities. Okay, I'm going to Phoenix, over 1,000 places to stay. I don't know about you, this feels very overwhelming to me. The dream, obviously, is here on the right. It's all the choices are made, but also the choices are made in a way that's perfect for me, right? I don't want someone else's perfect itinerary. I want it to be perfect for me. So the big psychology here that I think about is called choice overload. And we use this to mean essentially the fact that we have a really tough time making decisions when we have too many options to choose from. And sometimes that actually means that we don't make choices at all. So the classic study of choice overload, I think, imagine you are grocery shopping. There's a little booth offering you taste tests, right? Love when this happens when you're grocery shopping. And they want to offer you a variety of different flavors of jam. This is the classic study that was done. And in one group of this study, the table has 6 different flavors of jam for you to try. In the other condition, they've got 24 options of jam for you to try. And in the condition with 24 options, more people approach the table. I mean, this is exciting, right? Have you ever seen 24 flavors of jam? I'm not sure if I have. That's a lot of jam to check out, and people actually do try a slightly greater number when they show up at the table. But when it comes down to it, actually much, much fewer people choose to buy the jam. So in fact, 30% of the people who stopped to try the 6, so that's 30 people out of 104 who stopped in this condition, actually buy a jar of jam. And in the when the number of jams is 24 and 145 people are stopping, only 4% actually buy anything. Oh, sorry, 4 people, 3%. And why? Because it's too many choices, and that leads us to inaction. Okay, here's another one I really like. In this experiment, the research team gave participants the choice between a bunch of popular DVDs on the table in front of them, right? These are all movies that everybody's heard of. They're things that people are familiar with. And in condition 1, they're choosing among 30 DVDs. In condition 2, on the right, the team had given them just 5 DVDs to choose from. It's actually a subset of the 30, so it's not like there are different movies that we're talking about. Everyone is told you have to make a choice, and actually you have about a 20% chance of winning the DVD that you choose in a drawing after the study. This just sort of makes it more real and compelling to actually pick the one that you want, right? It doesn't matter if you're not going to actually get to watch it. Okay. So everybody makes their choice, and afterwards, each person is asked to rank on a score from 1 to 7. How much did you regret choosing the DVD that you chose? Any guesses what happened here? What do we think happened to the people who choose between 30 or the people who choose between 5? 5 for the win. More regret in the larger set. See, you all are experts already. That's right. So people in the large choice set group with the 30 DVDs felt a lot more regret over their decision, right? So what we're saying is that too many choices is bad for a couple of reasons. 1, we might not choose at all. And 2, we regret the choices that we make. So that brings me to behavioral opportunity in travel, number 1. That is to reduce choice, or at least the perception of choice. So what do I mean by that? One of my favorite ways to do this for myself is to filter with reckless abandon. Reduce the choice set as much as I possibly can. So it's tempting to really want to evaluate everything to make sure that you've truly optimized. But if you add some preferences, and you've cut out, some things that are probably not the things you're going to pick anyway, you've cut down your options dramatically. So here's an example from my travels. I'm going hiking at Mount Rainier this summer. This is screenshots from All Trails. I don't know if anyone's familiar, but essentially All Trails shows you in any given area or national park or state park or anything like that, all of the hikes or trails that are available to you. If I put no filters on this, there are 155 trails to choose from. And maybe that's nice if I'm going to live in Mount Rainier for the next 5 years, but I'm not. I'm there for 3 days. So I can't deal with 155 options. I don't want to look at them all. And honestly, looking at them all is just going to make me overwhelmed and probably regret the choices that I make. But if I add a whole bunch of filters, so I say I want hiking trails, maybe I want them to be kind of moderate, but I want them to be long enough, 5 or 10 miles. I add a few more things. I've now managed to get this down to 8 choices, and that feels so much better than 155. And products know this, right? So one thing that I think does a really nice job of this is Google Flights. So if you look here, yes, there are filters I can add, right? That's a great thing for them to do. Maybe I need to fly in time for dinner or something the first night. So I say, oh, I need to arrive by 6. Or maybe I can't leave until after work. So I say, nope, departing flight can't be till 6:30 or 7. Or maybe I know I'm going to need a checked bag. But Google Flights actually goes a step further than this, and this is why I love it. So first, they have already reduced my perceived choice set in the default search. So I get my best departing flights. There's these 3 of them at the top, right? And they know that best for a lot of people means that it's the cheapest, the shortest, the most direct, right? These are pretty common things that they can guess about what people are looking for. And then others are offered below the fold in case I don't like those so much, right? So they've said, here's 3. These are the best ones. Okay, fine. Maybe those aren't looking satisfactory to you. You can scroll down and check these other ones out. Then there are other ones, right? So if you look at the way bottom of this, there's a little line at the bottom that says 185 more flights. Okay, as soon as I see 185 more options, I start to think, what are those? Are they better? That sounds overwhelming, all these things. And I think the beautiful thing about this is that Google Flights has made it possible for me to get to every single option, right? We talk a lot about sort of the paternalistic choice and making sure that people have all the options available to them so that they can truly express their own choices. However, what they've done is suppress those choices and also suppress how many options there are so that I'm not even looking at that giant number unless I've already decided I don't like their top 3 and I don't like their next 15 or something like that. So there are options, but Google's not making salient how many options there are that I'm not considering unless I scroll all the way to the bottom. So I think they've done a really nice job of reducing the perception of choice. They haven't really reduced the options I can choose, but they've made it much, much easier for me to choose among what I've got. Okay, another important psychology here is decision fatigue. We've already established that sometimes we don't choose, and sometimes we regret our choices if there are too many, but we should also think about decision fatigue. So it's tiring to make choices, right? It takes up cognitive effort, which, we have cognitive energy, but it's finite. And as we get tired, our decisions get worse. So imagine a trip you're taking, and then imagine a trip at the scale of my year-long adventure. And there are a lot of decisions to make. It's really overwhelming. I feel overwhelmed just looking at this. This is a representative snapshot of a very, very small piece of what I'm attempting this year. Okay, so opportunity number 2 is to actually limit the amount of time that you're working on decision making. And that sounds not that complicated, but it's actually a really wonderful choice to make. So the idea here is to break up the tasks and not pretend that you're decision making until you are actually decision making. So one way you could look at this is look at all of my options and try to decide. That is one task, right? It takes me this whole amount of time. That is what I'm aiming at the whole time. Or you could actually sort of break this up and say, first, I'm gathering information. I'm not making decisions, I'm just learning. Then I'm going to browse options. Finally, I will make decisions. So if I go back to that hiking example, I could decide what trails to hike. Honestly, that's probably going to be a task that includes all the other pieces, but the whole time I'm going to spend several hours just scrolling through and trying to decide, and over time I'm going to wear myself out. And then honestly, I'm just going to end up stressed and not having made any choices. Or I could take this other approach. I could say, first, I'm just going to understand a map of the park. I'm going to look it up. I'm going to look for a trail map. I'm just going to see what's out there. No decisions. Next, I'm going to browse blogs, right? This is a great way that a lot of people plan their trips. Google is your best friend. You say, hey, 3 days in Mount Rainier, go, right? And you can read all kinds of people's blogs about things they did. And in doing that, I'm going to note down any hikes I see mentioned more than twice, for example. And in all of those tasks, I am not going to attempt to make any choices. So what I've done is sort of time box and carve out the time that I'm trying to make decisions and stick it all the way at the end. I'll also tell you that a pro tip to take this a step further would be to get rid of that completely. And this is something we do sometimes, is to say, actually, do those first 3 steps. Don't bother making the choices at all. Instead, show up at Mount Rainier, go to the visitor center, ask the park ranger, say, here are my preferences. I want X, Y, and Z. You decide for me. Everybody's happy. I'm probably going to end up with the same things anyway, but I've saved myself all of that cognitive effort of going through the decision-making process. So one product that I think does this really well is Airbnb, or at least can do this well if you're using it well. So like I said, it's less cognitively demanding to just browse things. So I can do that, right? I can go into Airbnb, I can say, okay, I'd like to go to Durham in this weekend. I have this group of people I'm going with. What are my options? Not making any decisions, not attempting to decide things. Instead, I can go through and just sort of heart or favorite my way through their list. I can say, okay, this looks interesting. Add that to my favorites list. This one doesn't look like it's going to fit all of us. Forget that. Okay. Then when I'm ready, I can just pull my wish list back up and then I can make decisions, right? But what I've done is separate out the tasks, the decision-making from the searching, and I've reduced my cognitive effort. I've reduced that decision fatigue all along the way. I've made this much easier for myself. Okay. Next part of traveling that is really painful. You've decided you're going somewhere, you've decided what you're doing, where you're staying, who's going with you, but now you actually have to go through the process of booking things and paying for it all. So, sorry, Ryan, to disappoint with my graphic skills. I decided that memes were better here.
No, that's cool. It's authentic. And plus,
Yeah.
look how disturbed the gentleman is on the right. I mean,
Yeah,
the left.
I think these just convey my feelings really nicely here. Okay, so the problem here, right, is that vacations are expensive, right? Traveling costs a lot. The dream is that we get to do this for free, but that's not how it works. Actually, it's really not how it works. This is an enormous thing, right? The tourism market is huge. In the US this year, the tourism market is projected to be over $1 trillion. So people are spending a lot of money. And the big psychology here, we call this the pain of paying. So this sounds really intuitive, right? Basically what we're saying is it's not fun. It hurts to pay for things. We don't enjoy it. It causes us sort of cognitive pain, and like sort of we lose utility in the world by handing over money for stuff. But there's sort of another level to this, which is that some purchases hurt more than others. And that's where behavioral science comes in. So one of the things that I have noticed the most in my nomad year is that paying for our accommodations is incredibly painful. So most people, I think, whether they rent their home or they own their home, they've got a pretty standard monthly payment, right? You decide before you move in how much you can afford, you budget for it, you decide what it'll be, and you pay it every month. But it feels sort of automatic, right? You've made the decisions, you know, X amount of dollars are going to go out of my paycheck every month, and it just sort of happens. For me, I'm living somewhere new every single month, but that also means I'm choosing somewhere new to live every single month. And that means I'm choosing how much to pay every single time. I feel that pain of paying so much more because it's a conscious payment decision much more frequently, right? I have this choice every few weeks. That's like, well, do I want to spend another $50 here? Is that worth it? Maybe I could save $25 here. Maybe $100 here is worth it, but not in that place. It just hurts so much more. So I said that some purchases are more painful than others. Behavioral opportunity number 3, I think, is to prepay when you can, especially for fun things. So when we prepay for things, we can enjoy them in the moment as though they were free. And obviously they weren't, but essentially what we've done is separate temporarily the pain of paying and the joy of experiencing, right? And so those things can be separated and don't need to happen together so that the enjoyment we get over here can be more pure. So we prefer to prepay for things when they are finite things and when they're fun things, like a vacation that you're taking once, right? Which is why I think this is a perfect insight right here. We prefer not to prepay for functional things and can prefer to pay for those for installments over time. So even if you think about taking out the amount of money, right? People often don't just buy a whole house, but the preference would be to pay for something like that in installments anyway. It's a functional good. It's something you're going to see the return from over time, right? The duration is longer, it's functional. We don't really want to prepay for that. We want to pay in installments. But when it's fun, like let's say I'm going on this adventure sea cave kayak tour. I didn't, by the way, but I looked at it a few weeks ago. It looked awesome. What we want to do is to prepay for these things because then I can show up the morning of, I can get in my kayak, and I don't have to be thinking, okay, I gotta hand over my cash or my credit card. I can just show up and say, wow, I'm just really, really enjoying my day. So I think one really interesting example of this is in the world of fine dining. So for those of you who haven't heard of this place, Alinea is a 3 Michelin-starred restaurant in Chicago. It happened to be right down the street from the place that I stayed right there. It was also out of my budget, so I can't actually vouch for how delicious it is, but I'm sure it's delicious. Alinea does their booking on Tock, so that's kind of like Open Table or Resi or anything like that, and you pay in advance. And there was some sort of question at first, sort of in the internet world, when they started doing this or when restaurants started doing this, about whether people would be willing to, right, to pay for their dinner way in advance rather than paying at the conclusion of the meal. It sort of breaks the traditional model, right? You don't think of going out to eat and paying for it way in advance. You think, I'm going to go out to eat and then I'm going to pay for it after I eat the food, right? But it turns out people are willing to do this. And behaviorally, it actually makes a lot of sense. So for an expensive experience like this, it's not really a functional good anymore. It's a hedonic, enjoyable, fun experience. And prepaying means that you get to show up and have a fantastic meal and not worry about paying, right? The experience that you have when you show up at Alinea that night, you might say, hey, I have this reservation, it's under my name. But over the course of the evening, there will be no moment when you have to hand over a credit card. There will be no moment in which you have to talk about payment. And so you just get to show up and live in this experience as if it's free, and that can sort of magnify the joy that you get. Has anybody on this call prepaid for a meal like this? I have yet to be asked to do this, but honestly, I think it's kind of fascinating. Oh, it looks like we have a few. That's great.
I'm just wondering if we can like prepay for Chipotle or something kind of weak sauce, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know.
But I guess that's what their apps are for.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so my next behavioral opportunity in this area is to then integrate losses. And I'm going to get into this in a sec. So when I say losses, I mean payments. And what I mean is to chunk them, basically. Pay in fewer chunks if you can, right? This is obviously with the caveat that the options to pay part now, pay part later are going to work for you better if that's what you've got in your monthly budget, for example. But if you can, pay in fewer chunks. Okay, so here I'm going to nerd out for a second, so bear with me. This is a quick note to explain why. This is the prospect theory curve. It's one of the fundamental graphs in behavioral economics, and it models the way that we feel, that's value on the y-axis, depending on the outcomes, good or bad, that's on the x-axis. So we can think of these as gains and losses, right? Gains in green in quadrant 1, losses in red. Okay, and this curve can be extrapolated to mean a lot of things. One of those implications is loss aversion. So a loss of a certain size feels more bad than a gain of that same size feels good. So let's make that feel real. If I take $5 from you, right? We're walking along the street. I steal $5 from you. That feels much more bad than if I had just handed you $5 feels good. So, let's say finding $5 on the street gives you 5 happiness points, right? Happiness points aren't a real thing, but let's just imagine that's how it works. Then me taking $5 from you might actually mean that you lose 8 or 10 happiness points. It's not 5 and 5. That's not how it works for us because we are loss averse, right? So it feels worse to be on that red side. And why? Because that loss curve is really steep. So whereas the gains curve is more shallow and both level off over time, even a loss of a small amount feels really bad just because losses feel bad. And if we take that one step further, bear with me, I know this is a lot of graphs. Because that loss curve is steep, let's say I'm going to take $10 from you. I could either take it all at once, and it'll hurt, but it'll hurt more steeply because of those first couple dollars, because of the way that curve is, and then it'll sort of level off. Or I could take $5 from you and then take another $5 from you. And because that curve is so steep, you actually lose more happiness points if I do it that way, if I take it 2 separate times. So that's what I mean. I mean, integrate losses by integrating or combining payments. So when I book an Airbnb, I like to pay, if I can, all at once, because it'll just hurt less psychologically, right? I just have to make this one payment rather than paying multiple times. And in the travel world, Southwest sort of does this by offering their checked bags for free and open seating. And so, their checking bags with them is not actually free. It's just integrated into the cost of the flight, right? And it just hurts less to pay for them that way. I've only paid one time. Same with seating. They let me pick any open seat, etc. There's also the power of free that goes into this. But some people love this and some hate it. Behaviorally, it really makes sense to integrate that cost. Whereas, let's say with Spirit, it's the opposite approach, right? They itemize the cost of everything. And now it hurts more when I have to pay for my flight, I have to pay for my carry-on, I have to pay for my checked bag, I have to pay for my seat, I have to pay for my seat on the way back. It hurts, right? It's not fun to pay that way. And so if we can integrate those things into fewer payments, we're just going to end up feeling less pain. Okay, last part. Now, making choices is tough, and paying for things is no fun at all. But maybe the most important thing, or at least the most lasting thing, is that we want to optimize for looking back and being happy with our trips, right? We're taking vacations because they should make us happy. So how many times has this happened to you, or maybe to a friend? So one of my good friends this past holiday season went to Vietnam. He went with his family. They had a fantastic experience. They visited the places his dad grew up, beautiful landscapes, buzzing cities. Their itinerary looked fantastic. But he called right after he got home. And the first thing he told us about was the flight delays. Not about the beautiful beaches, not about the wonderful family time. It was the time stuck in the airport. So what psychology can we apply here? So we call this peak end rule, and it basically tells us that the way we remember and sort of mentally rate an experience is based on its peaks, so the intense positive and negative moments, and then the end of the experience, its final moments. So I like this cartoon. This is VE for dogs, peak end rule edition. So we've got these two dogs going on a walk, right? Step 1, high intensity or low intensity. Step 2, both moderate intensity. Step 3, we switched the high and the low. And the dog in blue who went high, moderate, low, wow, I feel amazing. And the dog in the red who went low, medium, high, wow, I'm exhausted, because that's how they ended. And so this is borne out in real world scenarios all the time. This study is actually done with patients getting a colonoscopy, right? Nobody thinks that's fun, and looks at the way people remember that experience. So for some patients, they use the standard way to end the procedure, right? When it's done, it's done. For others, they add this 5-minute component at the end. So it's actually a little bit longer. So the addition is a little bit time consuming, but it's less painful. So when doctors use that longer procedure with the less painful end, patients view the overall experience as less unpleasant. They experience those final moments as less painful. They rank the procedure as less aversive, and are actually more likely to return for a repeat procedure when they need it. So the memory for both of those patients is influenced by the peak pain that they're felt, which is the same, but then it's also influenced by the final moments of what they experienced. So patient B shows this recency bias, essentially, because their pain was less than patient A's at the end of the procedure. They just feel it as less painful. And so those intense positive or negative peaks and the final moments are given the most weight in our mental calculus. Okay, so this is my behavioral opportunity number 5, which I'll break out into a few things. But my tip here is to optimize for the emotional highs and for the end of the trip. So a few ways you can do that, right? 1, you can think about booking one great thing instead of several good things, right? Because those peaks are going to be what stand out in your mind. You can also, like we just talked about, prepay to avoid painful moments, especially because for a lot of things, if you pay at the end, that's what you remember, right? You remember the paying, and that's not fun. And then my last pro tip, which doesn't work as well for me this year because I'm driving places, but is to say, if you're going to splurge on a flight, maybe you're going to get yourself a nice drink, you're going to upgrade to a first class seat, whatever that is, you should do it on the way home. Because what you're going to remember is going to be the peak and the end. So if you can make your travel back home as minimally painful, as pleasant as you possibly can, do it, but do it on the way home, not on the way there. And there's some really smart businesses that know this, that use these sort of end of experience delight moments to optimize for peak end rule. So the top is Disney, right? Disney is the master of crafting experiences. They also know that the way that you end your day matters a ton. So even if you're a parent who has spent all day dragging your screaming 3-year-old around the park, or you know that you've waited 8 different hours for 3 different rides over the course of a whole day, they end every single day with fireworks. Why? Because if they can give you this moment of delight at the end of the day, you're much more likely to look back and think, wow, that was a great day, a great experience. And I've actually had this similar experience, similar idea at some restaurants recently, where as I'm getting the check, as I'm paying my bill, they come over with a small free dessert, some cookies, like some fruit, whatever that is. And it's just adding some little moment of delight to make the end more pleasant, to make it happier, so that I look back on that experience with a more sort of rosy view. Okay, so just sort of to recap all these things, 5 behavioral insights for your next trip, 2 in the making choices bucket, so reducing choice or the perception of choice, just have fewer options to choose from, right? Find products that will help you do this on your own, artificially narrow that set. You want to break off and minimize the time actually making decisions. So dedicate time to browsing, dedicate time to learning, make decisions later. Don't try to make decisions the whole time. When you're paying for things, prepay when you can, especially if it's something fun. Reduce that pain of paying in that moment. And then integrate your losses when you can. Make payments in chunks. Do it together when you're financially able to reduce that pain. And then at the end, right, if you're want to be able to look back and remember that trip well, optimize for that emotional high and optimize for the end of the trip. Okay, that's my big spiel. Thank you for listening to all of this. I think we're going to transition into questions in just a sec, but just want to say happy travels. I hope people have some awesome trips this summer or spring or tomorrow, whatever it is.
Oh, this was awesome. Thank you so much, Erin. I actually found myself so interesting. When you asked that question about what vacations make you the happiest, I love bundles. Like I love, someone that books everything for you because for all the reasons that you mentioned, and I just hadn't realized that until now because I hadn't done that in a long time.
Yeah.
That said, I was just getting the order of questions in the in the chat. So Andrew, John, Jenny, you kind of made a comment, but I'm going to put you in there, and then Jake. I kind of like that John, Jenny, and Jake are going, and then maybe John, Jacob, Jingleheimer, Schmidt will come as well. But at any rate, Andrew, you are first. You want to come on and ask your question?
Thank you. So I was referencing the filtering of your choices with regards to the height. And so I'd be curious to better understand, what is your thinking in terms of narrowing down to 8 choices first, and then subsequently, I don't know if you actually expanded it further, given if you had already exhausted those 8 choices. I was curious doing either that or kind of narrowing it down to a smaller subset and then further narrowing down. Obviously, both ways could work. I was just curious to understand what way would your preferences and why?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think part of it has to do with how many things you're trying to choose in the end, right? So if I'm going hiking at Mount Rainier for 3 days, I'm probably looking for, 4 trails to hike, something like that, 5, I don't know. That's a little bit different from, I'm trying to choose what hotel I'm going to stay in. I want one. So I think keep that in mind first. The other thing is that I don't think that there is a truly optimal number of choices that is universal across contexts, right? I think context matters a lot here. And so I'm not sure that I think there is a rule where you could say, I have to get it to be, between 4 and 8 or something like that. I think that can be a little bit more intuition. As far as your question about which direction to go, I find that the most important thing for, I think, many people when they're making these decisions is to A, come out with a decision, and B, come out with a decision that they feel good about, right? It doesn't matter if you've decided and you're feeling sort of iffy about it and second guessing your choice. So in that way, I think you want to get to a point where you feel like you can build this confidence that you've exhausted all the options that you need to. So for example, I like your idea, the option that you've mentioned that's sort of narrow down as far as you can. 8, awesome. If I look at those 8 and I think, that's not it. Okay, take one filter off, right? I can ignore those 8 that I've already seen, and most products will do a pretty good job at sort of graying out the ones that you've already looked at. So then if I take one filter off and now I'm at 14, for example, now I just have 6 more to look at. And I think that will sort of be the way that gets you to minimal, overwhelming choice in a sort of iterative and gradual way.
That's
Thank
excellent.
you.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you so much. John, are you able to come on mic and ask your question? I'm looking for you, John, in the queue. All right, John may have had to jump. So then to Jenny, did you have any comments that you had wanted to make? Oh, Jenny's not there either. Strange. And Jake, let's see. Wow, that is wild. I feel like all the people that had questions popped off. So does anybody else have a question before I go and look at their questions? Because I can ask those. All right, so quickly, I'm going to ask Jake's question. Do payments always make people feel better compared to paying it all up front? I bet there's some people that want to get it over and done with and not pay, lose over a longer time period. Does that make sense to you?
I think I'm maybe understanding. So
I'm going to repaste what he put in the chat just so you see it.
yep.
Because I was in the same space. I was reading it, but
Okay.
processing it.
I think probably what he's saying is do payments in multiple payments make people feel better compared to paying all up front? Is that how you understand that?
I would concur, yeah.
Okay, so I think what I have talked about is that actually paying in fewer chunks, so potentially paying all up front, can actually be behaviorally better in a lot of cases, because then the number of losses felt over time is fewer. That being said, that actually does depend on the kind of payment. So as I think I mentioned, we tend to prefer to prepay for something that is fun. The kayak trip, for example. Sorry, not kayak the booking site, kayak like, here's me in a boat, right? The preference for payments that are more functional is often to do that in installments over time. It feels like those are things we can sort of go into this whole idea of mental accounting, but it's sort of something that we can take into budgeting over time, as opposed to a sort of fun, we talk about this as hedonic thing that I'd like to pay for now and separate completely from my experience of the good. So, right, I don't need to separate the experience of living in my apartment with my rent payment, but I'd like to separate out paying for that cool boating trip and then being able to experience that as fun.
Yeah, awesome. That was a nice elaboration on the talk. So thank you so much. Sam Loveland with the best last name ever. I just like to say Loveland. What is your question?
Thanks so much. I do love my last name as well. So my question is, this is a great presentation. I've loved it. I work on a hotel booking product myself, so this is super relevant. And it was interesting when you talked about how paying immediately or paying up front before the experience could be framed as a benefit. Because right now, the way we talk about it is we actually frame pay later as a feature or a benefit. Yeah. We'll tag a hotel and say you can pay later, like it's the best thing ever. So I was going to ask, do you think that a payment as large as some of these hotel bookings could be presented as a benefit if it's pay immediately?
It's a good question. So the power of pay later is really significant. So I think the fact that you all are using that is likely to be something that is very compelling for people, right? So what pay later does psychologically for us is basically say, I can make the decision now, but I don't have to feel the loss right now. And we can sort of pre-commit to that loss later. And so we can take out those, the decision and the loss moment. So it actually does really help psychologically as well as logistically, right? So what I haven't talked about in all of this talk is basically the when can people pay for things, right? And it's often at particular times in a month when their paychecks have come in and things like that, that we actually need to think about syncing those up. So in that way, I think pay later, again, sort of gets to that benefit for them. My hypothesis would be actually that the immediate payment is maybe not the way to go for something like this, because I would guess that for many people, the hotel would actually fall into that functional good kind of category as opposed to the hedonic good kind of category. Obviously, there are fuzzy lines there, right? You could imagine that this is a resort hotel, that whatever that is, right? You could imagine that as being somewhat hedonic, but I think for many people, the hotel fulfills a more functional purpose. And so not necessarily taking that same thing into account. I would also note that the pay later could still happen before someone stays. So, right, maybe there's 3 moments. I'm deciding now, I hit pay later. The payment happens in whatever, a month, a couple weeks, whatever that is. And then I stay at a third point in time. And so what that would accomplish is capturing the benefit of pay later and still allowing the payment to happen not at the moment when someone is enjoying the hotel.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That's a great way to distinguish those.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. No problem.
Yeah, and it's also a great illustration of like complicated contextual trade-offs, right?
Yeah. Completely.
So because a lot, I mean, there are all these principles, but context shift, then the rules of thumb change. I did
Really?
want to kind of parse what Jenny had written before she had to go. And I think this is kind of an ethical question. So I put it in the chat so everybody can kind of look at it. I think she was responding directly when you were talking about prepaying for meals, but she said, for me, it was confusing because of the drinks. We ended up paying in the end. I wish I'd been able to do that because I spent a lot more prepaying drinks I wouldn't have otherwise bought because I thought I had to. So
yeah.
what I'm hearing there is like kind of an ethical and a clarity in advertising issue.
Yeah, completely. And that reminds me that in many things, we were talking slightly about bundling earlier. And so bundling can be a really interesting, make fewer payments kind of thing. But people really don't go for bundles if there are pieces of the bundle that are useless to them, right? Like if I want 5 things and they're all there are 5 things in a bundle, I only want 2 of them. I don't like that bundle because I feel like I'm paying for stuff that I didn't use. And so I think that sort of gets to a similar point here where, if I paid for stuff, but it's not what I wanted, or I paid for it and now I feel like I have to consume it to sort of get the sunk cost out of my payment, that never feels good. So I think the prepayment really makes sense for something where you're going to consume the entire good. You want to consume that entire good, whether that's the kayak trip or a hotel stay or whatever that is, and not something where you're going to sort of spend the whole experience thinking about your payment, because the more you think about your payment, the more it hurts. So that's not fun.
Yeah, that's so wonderful. Can you just do me one favor so we can peek on this bad boy, Erin? Can you click back one slide?
Sure.
Okay, so hear me out, everybody. This is both the peak and the end, because I think you did such a wonderful job of saying, hey, here's the flow of a vacation, and these are the 3 areas where I think B-Side can make a wonderful impact, and boom, here are your 5 tips. So ladies and gentlemen, you've won a souvenir from today. You could take a screenshot of this slide. You can save it on your desktop. You can use this as an easy reference tool for next time you're at Kayak, Google Flights, or your favorite vacation packaging software. But I just thought this was incredible synthesis of a really complex area that we all don't think enough about. So everybody, please revel in the joy of the free gift that you've had today. It's like a virtual cookie. Or a Disney fireworks, but different. And let's give Erin a real and virtual round of applause for her awesome time today. Thank you so much. Man, I got to get good clapping sound effects going here, so much more energetic. But thank you all for spending time with us. And it is a bundle. You're a member, so come hang out in Slack. Come to our open event next week, and don't be a stranger. We're around to hang out. Thank you again, Erin. Any closing
Thanks, everyone.
thoughts?
I just hope that you all have the best trips in the next whatever amount of time that is, and happy to report back from Mount Rainier this summer. We'll see how many trips.
Especially when they use their free gift from our presentation today, Erin.
Exactly. That's right. Free gift. I should have put fireworks on this page, huh?
Exactly. Next time fireworks. All right, everybody. Thanks so much. I'm going to end the recording.